So good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. I wanted to just send a huge thank you out to Michelle for taking time out of her day to come and meet with us all this morning. And the reason I reached out to her is she has a lot of experience with mindfulness and meditation, and she does a beautiful job of sharing that. And I know with her expertise that you'll all get something out of this morning. Just wanted to come to everybody today in our community and gather like this as we've been doing for different sessions, yoga, and we've done Pilates, and just coming together with different exercises and activities so that we can be part of something and see each other, because we're very isolated right now. So anything that we can do to make it easier for us to get through this together and know that you have a place to come to, we're all here. So we're here to help support you all. And I couldn't think of a better way to just come together and ease our mind than by having a mindfulness workshop and a guided meditation. So I'm going to hand it over to Michelle. And again, I respect your time, and we want to thank you so much for sharing what you know with us this morning and just easing us together as a group today. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for everybody for jumping on.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So I hear a little bit of an echo. So if you're not on mute, maybe mute yourself. Oh, wait, I think it's better. So, okay, I think we are good. So sometimes if your volume's up, I can sometimes hear the echo. So I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So we're going to keep this to the expected half hour. And before we start, I just want us to kind of drop into this space together. As Andrea said, it's so great that we can come together and connect in this way, even though it's virtual. It's so nice to see everybody's faces, and I see some familiar faces and some familiar names, and some unfamiliar faces and unfamiliar names. So this is really special for me. So huge thanks to Andrea for setting this up for us. So before we begin, let's just sort of land where we're at. So I'll invite you to just sit in whatever way is comfortable for you. And if your eyes are open, you can either close them or you can just kind of soften your gaze. So perhaps if you were looking around the room, maybe you just lower your gaze to look at your hands or to look at your lap. And just feel a sense of connection to where you're at in this moment right now. And so maybe you're feeling your feet planted on the floor. Or maybe you're feeling yourself sitting, making connection with the chair or the ground beneath you. And just begin to notice your breathing. Paying attention to the fact that your body knows what to do. Your body breathes naturally. And when you're ready, you can bring some movement back to your body. Maybe opening your eyes and just look around at the space that you're in. Maybe noticing something that you haven't noticed before. Maybe it's the way that picture is crooked on the wall, like mine is. And so when we land in the space that we're at, we begin to notice and we begin to observe. And we begin to see things that maybe we hadn't recognized or realized before. And so this is what mindfulness teaches us, is to be in the present moment on purpose and to be observing what's happening around us. And so we can start to look at the events of today and the events of the last few weeks and everything that we're all going through. And it's very easy for us to take all of that on. But what mindfulness allows us to do is it allows us to be a conscious observer. So it allows us to sort of zoom out, to be present, and to be able to kind of look from the outside in at what's going on, both in our external world and in our internal world as well. And that was really a huge realization for me in my role. So for those who don't know me, so I'm a police officer in Norfolk, and I started in my career very young. So I was 22 years old, and I started to see everything that was happening in the world around me, which quite honestly surprised me. I grew up in Franklin. I still live in Franklin. And I kind of thought it was like this like quintessential community. You know, I grew up here. I had roots here. And then I started seeing so much around me that was challenging, so much that was filled with despair and destruction. And there was addiction, there was violence, and all of this was happening in my community. And I felt really helpless to do anything about it. And that really caused me a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And I was experiencing a lot of depression as well. And so I tell you that because I feel like it's a very similar experience that we're all going through right now as a collective sort of humanity, that we're sort of seeing destruction, we're seeing disease. And in turn, that's making us feel dis-ease in our body. And so we can look at disease in that way, that it's sort of the physical manifestation of stress that we're all experiencing. And so we can return to a mindfulness practice at any time when we start to notice those thoughts, feelings, and emotions really kind of getting the better of us. So I can see some of you. So raise your hand if you have felt any sort of stress by what's going on recently. Okay, so pretty unanimous. We're all feeling stress. And so I think, unfortunately, stress kind of gets a bad rap, right? We look at stress like it's a bad thing. And so stress is actually designed to help us and to help us rise to the challenge. And so stress isn't inherently a bad thing, but it's how we're responding to it. And so I often like to talk with people about the way our brains operate. So if you think back to, the caveman days, right? Things that they had to worry about were hunting and gathering, so food, survival. So we're kind of in this state now that we're concerned about survival, yes, but we also have all these other external influences that are really kind of bringing us to our breaking point, because we have a constant news cycle. And I heard a really interesting statistic the other day that says 95% of Americans check the news once a day. And that makes sense, right? Everybody wants to know what's going on in the world. And that depends on the different mediums of news sources that you use, whether it's internet or social media or the actual, live news on the television. But what was interesting to me is that only 22% of Americans actually have faith in their news as trustworthy. And so 95% of us are watching the news, but only 22% of us are buying into it. And so what does that tell us? It tells us that the news is sort of creating this reaction in our body that allows us to feel unsafe. And it helps us feel like we can't trust it. And so in the body, we begin to have this manifestation of stress that is really kind of creating a source of anxiety in our lives. Now, add into that the financial stress that many of us are feeling right now, whether we're out of work or our work hours have been cut back. Add in the stress of being home with our families 24/7. We love our families dearly, right? But being home together and being together 24/7 brings its own sense of challenges. So you look at sort of some of the top stressors that people experience in life, and it's, job loss, financial, marital issues, family issues. We're living in this right now. And so go back to those hunting and gathering days. It was pretty simple, right? The body knows what to do. The body knows when they need to fight or flee. But right now, we aren't really in a life or death situation per se, but our mind and body is telling us alert, danger. And so every time we turn on the news or every time we go on social media and we see yet another post about, the virus that's going around, it's putting our mind and our body into high alert. And so what happens when our mind and body is in high alert, we're walking around in a constant state of stress. And we have now dumped all of these stress hormones into our body that can only be released through exercise, through communication, through connection with other people, through mindfulness practice, we can learn to manage those stress symptoms, because the stress is never going to go away. We're in a high level of stress right now, yes, but mindful practice allows us to come back to the present moment. It allows us to find a sense of ease and peace within all of it, because the stress is going to come again. And it may not come for all of us collectively at the same time, but we're going to have other moments in our life that we're going to be experiencing high levels of stress or anxiety. And so I wondered if all of us collectively had an established mindfulness practice before this happened. I wonder if people would have been able to manage it a little bit differently. And it really sort of lends itself to being kind of an advocate for mindfulness, that if we're able to build the tools and we're able to build that inner resiliency for when these stressful events happen, we're going to be able to manage them a lot easier. And I know many of you out there are parents, and for those of us who have young children, this is why we're seeing all kinds of social emotional type health programs kind of crop up in our educational system, because our children are now learning the skills that we as adults should have learned in childhood. Because if we learn these skills in childhood, we're able to build pathways in the brain that allow us to manage challenge. And that's really the beauty of mindfulness. It really is giving us that ability to manage that kind of stressful part of the brain, which is the limbic part of the brain. So if you kind of split the brain into two, the lower half of your brain is the limbic system, and that's in charge of fight, flight, or freeze. Most Americans are living in the limbic system of the brain multiple times per day. What mindfulness allows us to do is to move us from the limbic part of the brain to the prefrontal cortex, to the neocortex, which is the more rational, thoughtful part of the brain. And so we need to be providing ourselves with opportunities throughout the day to get out of that fight or flight portion of the brain and to be able to get into the part of the brain that allows us to manage things with a little bit more ease. And so we can do that through mindfulness. And if you don't have any sort of established mindfulness practice, my hope over the next 10 minutes or so is to give you some sort of sustainable ways to drop mindfulness into what you're already doing. Because I don't know about all of you, but I live for wellness. Like this is a dream to be here talking with all of you this morning, because I think we can learn so much from each other, and we can, just what Andrea is doing, like we can share information collectively. And it's such a beautiful thing to be able to support ourselves emotionally and from a standpoint of health and a standpoint of social connection. This is such important work. And, you know, for me, it's really been a journey for myself to really find ways that I can bring mindfulness into everything that I'm doing. So if I circle back to when I was, 24 years old, very young in my career, I reached a breaking point that I really needed to learn tools to handle my emotions because I was using all of the wrong things, right? I was using alcohol. I was using bad relationships. I was using, television and movies. I was using disconnection, right? I'd isolate. And so all of those things, contribute to this disease and dis-ease in our mind and body. And when I started learning about mindfulness, for me, it was really a practical solution to a complex problem. And, I was a person who didn't have a lot of tools in my tool belt. Nobody really kind of talked to me about feelings or emotions when I was younger. Loved my parents dearly, but that just wasn't part of our conversation as parents, which I think that's drastically changing now in parenting today. We're talking a lot more about feelings and emotions, but not having those skills created me as a young adult being somebody that couldn't manage the stuff that was being thrown at me until I met a really great psychologist who was my therapist, and he introduced me to mindfulness back before mindfulness was sort of like kale, right? It's like this buzzword. It's like the superfood, and everybody's like, mindfulness, like what's this all about? And so for me, mindfulness was a practice that seemed really simple. It wasn't religious, although it can be, right? You can use it as a spiritual practice, but it doesn't have to be. So I sort of bought into that because I really didn't know kind of where I was at with my own spirituality. And I didn't know that I really wanted something that was spiritual, but I wanted to believe in something that was greater than myself, but had, sort of a practical aspect to it that was rooted and grounded in science. And so if you look at the science today, it's really in its infancy from a research perspective. We've really only been looking at mindfulness for about 20 years or so for research purposes. So in terms of studies, that's pretty new. But what we're finding is that the science is speaking for itself. They are showing on functional MRIs, they're looking at people who meditate and people who are using some type of mindfulness practice, and they're comparing their brain to people who don't use these types of practices. And what they're showing is actual physical changes in the brain. So they're seeing an increase in gray matter. They're seeing increases in synapses and pathways. So it's really cool to think that even at the age of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, we can still continue to grow and to kind of create these pathways in the brain that allow us to handle challenges with more ease. And that's really an incredible thing. And when you start to see the science, you're like, wow, there's something to this. And so what's mindfulness? Mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment on purpose with kindness and curiosity. And so that's a mouthful, right? So mindfulness is paying attention on purpose. So it's being present for what you're doing. It's waking up to your life. It's not multitasking, which many of us are really good at multitasking. We put that on our job applications, right? It's like, I'm a great multitasker. And it's like, the brain doesn't actually love multitasking. The brain loves to focus on one thing at a time. And that's what mindfulness teaches us. So when we are sitting with our children, we are fully present with our children. We're not sitting on our devices, returning our emails. I'm totally guilty of it, like every day. And I have to every day bring a hand to my heart, forgive myself, take a breath, and remember my practice. Okay. So mindfulness isn't about the destination, right? It's about the journey, and it's about working on this journey every single day. Because I'm telling you right now, after practicing for 14 years now, there are days I get it right, and there are days I still get it wrong, and I still have to remember, and I still have to be gentle with myself. And that's where the kindness and curiosity piece comes into this. It's not just about being present and being focused. It's also about bringing a sense of curiosity to our experience. So, wow, I wonder why I'm feeling anxious right now. Or I wonder why I just snapped on my husband. Or I wonder why I'm irritated with that coworker. Or I wonder why that coworker is being a complete insert your favorite curse word here, right? Like, it's looking at the human experience and understanding that we are all part of greater humanity, and we all are made of both strength and struggle. So we're made of both. We can do both. And so the curiosity allows us to be more responsive instead of reactive. And for those of you with children, we can look at our little kiddos, and when they're having a hard time, it's just that. They're in the middle of operating from that limbic part of the brain. They're frustrated, they're throwing a tantrum. Every parent has experienced this. And we have to remember that in that moment, they're having a hard time. They're not giving us a hard time, even though it feels that way, because we want to personalize it, but they're having a hard time. And we can do the same thing for ourselves. It's not that we are, experiencing this really challenging moment that's really stressful and we're reacting. We can bring a sense of curiosity to that experience and say, wow, I wonder why I got so triggered by that. And then we can kind of connect the dots backwards and say, wow, you know what? I remember that I didn't get a great night's sleep last night. Or you know what? I've been on my digital device so much today. Or I haven't been out in nature. Or I haven't eaten, really healthy foods today. And so all of these things, when we look at wellness as a whole, and I know Andrea talks about this a lot, it's like we can look at our lives holistically, and we can look at all of the influences, whether it's the constant news cycle, whether it's being on social media too much, whether it's not eating healthy foods or not getting outside. All of these things contribute to the way we feel. We don't have to judge it, right? That's the non-judgmental part of mindfulness. It's about being non-judgmentally curious about the experience. And then we can take steps to mitigate the stress. And that's really where the kindness comes in and the self-compassion comes in. And we can do that with mindful practice, whether it be yoga, whether it's meditation, whether it's breathing exercises, or maybe it's just dropping a moment of mindfulness into the things you're already doing. And so I'll give you an example. I don't know how many of you fall into this trap, because I certainly do. You're in line at the grocery store, and what do we immediately pull out to fill the time when the line is long? If you're anything like me, usually it's my phone. I'm pulling up, checking my emails, maybe sending a text, because we want to multitask, right? We want to be able to use that time effectively. We want to be efficient. We want to fill all of our available time with stuff, because that is efficiency. That's how we succeed. But what goal are we really after? We have to think about that. We have to think about ways that maybe we can use that time in the grocery store line to just be present, to feel our feet planted on the floor, to maybe make eye contact with somebody else in line, to maybe start a conversation with somebody. And so it's these small moments that, just like when we kind of opened this meeting together, it's sort of noticing the things that you don't often pay attention to and really being present, waking up to your life. And you know, our kids are so good at this. I often give an example where one morning I was upstairs and I was getting ready, and, you know, I was like rushing, like trying to get to work. And my daughter was downstairs. She was 8 at the time, or maybe 7. And she was yelling like, "Mommy, mommy, come down here quick." And I'm like, oh, and where does my mind immediately go? There's a problem. I don't have time to deal with this right now. I'm going to be late for work. She's going to be late for school. Like, what tragedy has befallen our family at, 6:30 a.m. So I run downstairs, and she's sitting on the couch, and she's like, "Mommy, come here." I'm like, "What?" She says, "You have to sit right here in this spot on the couch. You can feel the sun coming through your window, shining on your face." And I was just like, I'm an asshole, right? Like, I am the worst parent in the world, right? So I immediately walk over, and she shows me exactly where to sit. And she was right. The sun was like beaming through the window, and you could feel the warmth on your face. And so our kids are naturally mindful. Our kids are naturally curious about the world around them. They're naturally compassionate. So we can kind of take a page out of their book, and we can really experience life through the eyes of a child, with the wonder and the curiosity and the ability to be present, the ability to respond instead of react. And so that's really what mindfulness teaches us. It teaches us to stop multitasking, to put down the phone, to take a minute to breathe. Maybe you're working from home right now, and you're at your desk, and you're responding, and you're typing, and maybe it's just taking a minute to push yourself back from your desk, to take a minute to just breathe, to drop into a mindfulness practice. So mindfulness doesn't have to be going to a yoga class or sitting on a meditation pillow or chair or, yoga mat for 30 minutes and trying to meditate. A lot of times that can bring, for new folks to mindfulness, that can bring a lot of frustration, and a lot of thoughts are going to come in. And so you can practice mindfulness by just taking a minute or two, by just finding small moments during your day that maybe you don't reach for the digital device, or maybe you wake up in the morning and you don't immediately go to your cell phone. It's hard, right? Because we all have our alarm clocks, are mostly our cell phones. Another statistic that I just read is that 85% of Americans within the first 15 minutes of waking up in the morning are on email or social media. 85% of us. And we can self-reflect on that. And again, from the standpoint of non-judgment, from the standpoint of curiosity, we can say to ourselves, wow, I wonder if that's an area that maybe I can lean into this a little bit. Maybe instead of waking up and going right to social media or my cell phone or emails or texts, maybe I shut off my alarm. Maybe I take 5 minutes to just sit and just breathe and just be. Or maybe I go into the shower first thing and I use the shower as a meditation, just kind of being present and being present as the water's running down your body. Or maybe you go downstairs and you make your coffee or your tea mindfully, where you aren't on your cell phone. You're just present for the process of making the coffee or making the tea, feeling the warmth of the mug in your hands, smelling the scent, tasting it, being present for your life, waking up to your life. This can take 5 minutes. It's actually how I start my morning every day. It's really sort of a beautiful part of my day, so much so that this is like really dorky, but like I go to bed at night and I always think of things I'm grateful for. And I actually get excited for like the morning. And I never used to be a morning person, but I get excited now to wake up early and to have my little coffee routine and to be fully present using all of my senses. It's such a great way to start the day. So I would invite and encourage you to participate in something like that. And so why don't we drop into a very short meditation, and just for the purposes of time and to appeal to everybody's experience, this is going to be about 3 to 4 minutes. And this is a practice that you can then replicate at home. So I hope you can kind of experience it here and now, but it's going to be easy enough for you to replicate. And I can also sort of write down some of the steps too. And I'll give you all resources too once we come back. So I'll invite you to sit comfortably, whatever that looks like for you. And a lot of people think that for meditation, you need to be sitting or laying a certain way. The biggest thing is that your spine is straight. The reason that we like the spine straight is so that we can better access the breath and really experience the quality of breath in the body. But with that said, if you have back issues, or if you're like, Michelle, I am just not into sitting up right now, maybe you lay down on your back, or maybe you just sit in any way that's comfortable. And so when you're ready, you can close your eyes. If you're not comfortable closing your eyes, you can just find a focus point on the floor, or maybe look down at your hands. Some people like to focus on an object, maybe a candle or a picture of a loved one, some other kind of talisman. And again, we'll bring ourselves back to landing in this space, landing where we're at right now, without judgment, with a sense of kindness towards ourselves, no matter how we're feeling. Just bringing a sense of curiosity to our experience, being present in the here and now. And just begin to notice that you're breathing, remembering that our body knows what to do. The primitive part of our brain is always there to care for us and to keep us going. We can remember that in times of stress. We can bring ourselves back to the moment where we're sitting. We can bring ourselves back to the breath, knowing that the breath is a human reset. The breath allows us to access the part of the brain that helps us reason, that helps us find ease and discomfort. And so we'll begin by bringing some intention to the breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Just noticing the sensation of the breath, maybe the feeling of the air coming in through your nose. And I'll invite you to bring one hand to your heart and one hand to your stomach. And this is just an invitation. If this isn't comfortable for you, you can leave your hands down in your lap. But if you have brought a hand to your heart and a hand to your belly, you can really tap into the felt sensation of the breath. Noticing how as you breathe in, your chest expands, your belly pushes your hand away, and as you breathe out, your chest contracts and your belly becomes soft. Take a couple more rounds of breath on your own, noticing the feeling against your hand. And remain with your hand on your heart for just another moment. The beautiful thing about accessing the part of our brain that allows us to think and reason through breath is also the part of the brain that helps us have empathy and compassion for not just ourselves, but for other people. And so in this time and space of uncertainty and disconnection, we can always return our hand to our heart and feel a sense of ease and connection with others, those who are close to us, those in our community, and those in the larger world. We can expand our consciousness all the way out, feeling that sense of compassion for all beings, and remembering that we're a part of the whole. We are connected in breath, both to ourselves and to humanity. And you can release your hands from your heart and bring them back down to your lap or by your sides. Bring a little bit of movement back to your body. If your eyes were closed, you can open them. Just being gentle with yourself, coming back to the moment. And so that's a very small, tiny meditation and a practice that you can do anytime. So just pausing to tap in and tune into the breath. Maybe bringing that hand to your heart. And, if we had more time, I'd ask how that felt for everybody, because everyone's experience might be different. That might have been emotional for you, might have felt uncomfortable. You might have felt that you had trouble breathing with your hand like that. All experiences are okay. And that's kind of the beauty of mindfulness. There's no wrong way to do it. There's no wrong way to meditate. And so just being easy with yourself, being non-judgmental. And I really wanted to offer that practice to you. And I'm sorry we went like a minute over, but I just really wanted to tune into all of you and to our kind of experience in the world right now. And that felt important to me to do. So I hope that was enjoyable for all of you as well. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to put in the chat. Andrea, is this cool if I put some contact information in the chat so people can follow up with me after?
Absolutely. Go ahead, put it in the chat.
Awesome. So I do, as much as I was like, don't be on social media all the time, like I'm on social media all the time. So you guys can always follow me there. I like to post a lot of tips or techniques or little, meditations. I do a ton on Instagram stories if people are on Instagram. But usually I post like once a day, some type of tool or some type of learning experience, all kind of relative to mindfulness. So you can follow me there. If you don't do any of the social media stuff, I have a website and I do a weekly email, usually with either a blog or a mindfulness tip. So you can sign up for my email list if that's helpful. I also have some free meditations that I recorded, so I will give you the link for that too. And I really do live for this, so if people have questions or they want to kind of dig into this more, just definitely contact me. I'm happy to chat with you further about any of this. You're welcome, everybody.
Michelle, thank you so much. I'm
You're
going to stop the
welcome.
recording. Just let everybody say thank you to you.